Oh, well, there's some there's some great research on Montessori and also Montessori-like things. For sure, the place that everyone needs to start is Angeline Lillard's article published in Science in the fall of 2006. A dynamite study, fantastic design. In effect, was able to do something that's hard to do. She got something called a random assignment to conditions because the Montessori schools in Milwaukee, where her study was done, because they're popular, not everybody can get into them, so you have to enter a lottery. And she was able to essentially compare the lottery winners, those who went to the Montessori school in Milwaukee, with lottery losers, the people who ended up going to lots of other schools, some of them very good schools, without question. She was able to compare how the kids who went to the Montessori school did to kids who went to, these other schools, and just saw these, the sort of things that Montessorians would hope to see. She saw all of it. She saw academic benefits. She saw, particularly in things like creativity, self-expression, their sophistication of language use and writing. But there are also some things that, if we take a minute and think about how, well, what we want for our kids from an academic or from a school experience, things like socialization. I mean, there were clear differences in basically how kind they were to one another and how collaborative they were in their style of play. One of the things that she talks about that I kind of resonate with is she talked about the difference in the amount of a kind of playground activity that was called ambiguous rough play. We can all think of ambiguous rough play, what that looks like, and that's when you have two young children who are playing, and it's rough, and you really can't tell if they're enjoying it or not. Something's going on here, and they're getting a little bit amped up, and it's maybe going a little bit over the top, it's not a positive engagement. It really is kids getting a little bit out of hand with each other. There's dramatically less of that ambiguous rough play, and significantly more of what she called positive shared activities. So kids engage with each other in a meaningful way on the playground in unstructured time, basically having positive interactions with each other. And then there was something else in her study that I think is really important, and that I'll be replicating in some work that I'm going to be doing in the future, and that is this domain of executive functions. So executive functions are the kind of thinking that we do to organize ourselves and to evaluate our performance and to adjust the strategies that we might be implementing. These are the kind of sort of feedback loops and planning thoughts that we have to engage in for effective goal-directed behavior. It's how we keep ourselves squared away. And in fact, these class of mental operations that we call executive functions are kind of like the things that we use to be the CEO of ourselves, okay? And so even with young children, you can measure some aspects of this stuff. Obviously, as children get older, you can really directly measure some of these things. But what she was able to do with a young kid version of some of the tools that we would use as neuropsychologists, for example, to measure executive functions, she showed a dramatic benefit for the Montessori educated children that persisted in some of these sort of self-organizing, weighing possibilities, kinds of mental operations. Executive functions are a big deal, and I think that we're going to be seeing more and more attention paid to these in research on education. People are sort of catching on to the relevance of these kinds of mental operations. So, the place to start is with Angeline Lillard's work. There's other work as well that's not, doesn't have as good an experimental design, but really when people ask, does this work and how can you get past selection effects, because it must be only people who love their children who send their kids to Montessori schools, right? That's what people will say. Well, they should look at the Craig Montessori example, the study that Lillard did.